Привет всем! Я с рождения говорю на русском языке.
Merhaba, iyi günler. А наш родной язык турецкий.
Добрый день, я говорю на украинском.
У всех у нас есть праздник 21 февраля. Какой, спросите вы, день родного языка?
Для кого-то родной язык русский, а для кого-то турецкий. А вот в Англии говорят на английском языке, и английский язык мы учим в школе и в колледже.
А теперь мы предлагаем вам посмотреть сказку «Три медведя» на английском языке.
Приятного вам просмотра!
There was once a little girl who went for a walk in the forest and got lost. She tried to find her way home, but could not, and at last she came to a little house in the forest. The door was open, and she peeped in. There was nobody at home, so she went in. These houses belonged to 3 bears. The father bear was a great big shaggy bear. The mother bear was a smaller bear. And the baby bear was a little bear, and his name was Misha. All the bears were out for a walk in the forest, while their soup was getting cold.
There were only 2 rooms in the house, one the dining room and the other the bedroom. The little girl first went into the dining room, and there she saw 3 basins of soup standing on the table. The first was a great big basin, and belonged to the father bear. The second was a smaller basin, and belonged to the mother bear. And the third was a little blue basin, and belonged to Misha, the baby bear. Next to each basin was a spoon, a great big spoon, a smaller spoon, and a little spoon. The little girl picked up the great big spoon and took a taste from the great big basin. Then she picked up the smaller spoon and took a taste from the smaller basin. Then she picked up the little spoon and took a taste from the little blue basin. And she liked Misha's soup best of all.
Feeling rather tired, the little girl looked round and saw 3 chairs. A great big chair, a smaller chair, and a little chair. She tried to get onto the great big chair but fell off it. Then she sat on the smaller chair and didn't feel very comfortable. So she tried the little chair, and it was so comfortable that she clapped her hands and picked up the little blue basin and began eating. When she had eaten up all the soup, she swung backwards and forwards on the chair till it broke and she fell down on the floor.
She got up and went into the next room. There stood 3 beds, a great big bed, a smaller bed, and a little bed. First she lay down on the great big bed, but it was too wide for her. Then she lay down on the smaller bed, but it was too high. And then she lay down on the little bed, and it was just right for her, so she fell fast asleep.
Soon the bears came home. They were very hungry. The great big father bear picked up his basin, looked into it, and roared in his great big voice, "Who's been tasting my soup?" And the mother bear looked into her basin and said, in her sweet voice, "Who's been tasting my soup?" And Misha looked at his empty basin and squeaked in his tiny little voice, "Who's been tasting my soup?" and gobbled it all up.
Then the great big father bear looked at his chair and roared in his great big voice, Who has been sitting on my chair and moved it out of place? And the mother bear looked at her chair and said in her sweet voice, Who's been sitting on my chair and moved it out of place? And the little baby bear looked at this broken chair and squeaked in his tiny little voice, Who has been sitting on my chair and broken it to pieces?
Then the three bears went into the bedroom. The great big father bear roared in his great big voice, Who's been lying on my bed, and crumpled it up? And the mother bear said in her sweet voice, Who's been lying in my bed, and crumpled it up? And the little baby bear stood on a stool to get into his bed and squeaked in his tiny little voice, Who's been lying on my bed?
And suddenly he saw the little girl asleep there and squeaked out again in his tiny little voice, There she is, hold her, she is, hold her. Oh, he was just going to bite her, then the little girl opened her eyes and, seeing the three bears, ran to the windows. The windows was open and she jumped out and ran away, and the three bears couldn't catch her up.